At Ferris and Thomas Law Attorneys, we're passionate about working with clients to find solutions to their issues. We work hard to get you the results you need so you can move on with your life. Ferris and Thomas Law is a law firm with deep roots in Wilson, North Carolina, and the surrounding area. Our firm helps clients who have been injured, arrested, or simply need more information about their rights and legal options. Contact us at 252-243-3000 or visit us online to learn more.
So obviously it still exists, but I do think it's getting better within the academic world anyway.
Well, thank you. That's a valuable perspective.
Let me say that when I was growing up, there are a few things that really stand out that I want to share with you guys tonight and everybody listening. And one is that when my father and mother decided to purchase some land in Wilson County many years ago when I was a very young girl, I understand from my parents that they had an auction on some property in Wilson County, and my father wanted to build a larger home for his family. And he went to the auction sale, the sale of the property, and the property was a location where there used to be a school in Wilson County called Wilbanks. And that school was where the so-called colored or Negro children attended years ago. And they were selling the property in the school, and my parents wanted that property. And my daddy was the only African-American there, and he bid on that property. And they would not allow him to get the bid, and they just ignored him when he bid it. And a white friend of my father's who had a great deal of respect for him in the neighborhood actually bid on the property and purchased it. And because of his caring and respect for my father and the relationship that they had, he actually sold the property to my dad for a lesser amount than what he purchased it for at the auction sale. Wow. So that is something that I remember hearing my father talk about. And I also remember seeing my mom sit at our kitchen table when I was a little girl. And many of you have heard this story before. And she was teaching people how to read the preamble to the North Carolina Constitution so that they could exercise their right to vote. And I remember watching her and seeing that when people couldn't read the preamble, she would teach them how to memorize it. And if they needed to go to the polls, she would make sure that my dad provided transportation to get them there. And if they needed someone to go in with them, they would request it and they would allow her to go in and help them vote. So that had a profound impact on me. But yet the people in Wilson County chose many years later to elect me to be their state legislator. Number one, as an African-American female, the only one elected in Eastern North Carolina that was African-American. And indeed, when I left having multi and triple counties, I was elected by my hometown of Wilson County, by whites, blacks, Hispanics, whomever. And I served in the General Assembly for 9 consecutive terms, almost 18 years. And people of all races selected me to do so. And that history that I had with my mother and people learning how to exercise their right to vote, and my having an opportunity to actually go to the General Assembly and represent all races of people was just something that my parents thought they would never live to see. And that was important for them to have witnessed before they died at 92 and 96 in 2014. So we have definitely made a great deal of progress just from my personal story. And there are other things that I could tell you, like the time when my parents were asked to integrate the schools in Wilson County and send their children to schools for white children for integration purposes, and how they hung a noose in my parents' yard and threatened them not to send their children to the white school. That would never happen today. But those are things that are history. It's important to know your history, therefore you can't move forward in the future. But you don't want to repeat it either, so you need to know it. And I just see that we're moving forward in Wilson, a lot of positive things that are happening that my parents didn't envision in a lifetime. And I've seen things positive happen that I didn't envision in a lifetime. So yes, we are making progress. And I think that internationally and nationally, we're going to see even more of a change with this generation than what I've been able to see in my generation and what my parents saw in their generation. So I have very high hopes and a positive outlook.
That's excellent. And your parents would be so proud of you and everything you've accomplished, and everything you've done for the people of Wilson County of all races.
Thank
And
you.
we all thank you for your service in the General Assembly.
And it humbles me. Thank you.
Corey, if I may jump in there for just a quick second.
Yes.
The reason I've been quiet up to this point is I'm not from Wilson like the majority of the panel is. So my experience is a little different. It's more how does Wilson compare maybe to some of the other places that I've lived, plus my own experience. So I want to share two things in particular is, you know, I grew up with being the son of an Air Force dad, and my wife is the same. And so being military kids, we've lived not just in the States, but also overseas. And not only that, one of the things that really surprised me was after I got to Wilson back in 2018, the Lord really revealed to me that this is the first place that either myself or my wife have ever lived that's not a military community. And by that, I mean it doesn't have military hubs in it, like a base or just that kind of atmosphere. And so I was kind of pondering the ramifications of that. And when we talk about things like diversity and the opportunity to meet people of different ethnicities and backgrounds and nationalities, a lot of times that comes with military bases and situations like that. And so I've never lived in what I call a closed community before until I've lived in Wilson, you know, a community where people have grown up generationally here. And you know, for me, my whole experience has been living in outside DC, Virginia Beach, even in South Georgia, where people were constantly coming into town and going out of town. And that creates a certain type of transitional nature where you expect change and you expect to kind of rub up against different types of people. So I think I can commend Wilson for being as far along as it has, or it is, because it hasn't had that woven into the fabric. I think Wilson's quite impressive to be as far along as it is right now. The other thing I want to kind of bring is a generational perspective. So I'm 42 years old. I'm Generation X. And despite my dashing good young looks, I am 42. And so I, you know, with that is, I think I remember being in high school in South Georgia and being in band and having friends of all different types of races, Asians, Hispanics, black guys, and of course, white people. And so, you know, the band for me was a melting pot where I just had friends. And I remember the first time I smacked up against racism, not for me, but for some of my black friends, was when I was a senior in high school. And I remember being so angry about it and saying, there's going to be a day when the people that I saw on TV that I called like the pot stirrers, the people that just kind of tried to stir things up racially all the time, they're going to all just die. And it's going to be a great day. And I really remember thinking that as a high schooler. You know, and then eventually we're going to have, you know, the good old boy system's going to be gone, and people are just going to grow up and they're just going to respect each other because they're people, right? And so here I am some 20 plus years later, and I think, speaking as a Generation X person, I think there's a certain level of frustration and anger that we're not further along than we should be. That those people still haven't let it go, and those people are still teaching their kids the same ridiculous things they taught them back when I was in high school. And so, you know, I kind of bring all of that to this topic, and so I just wanted to kind of throw that in there as perspective of my childhood, my upbringing, and then also perspective of what Wilson's like being kind of a locked, closed community. As a person moving into Wilson, it's hard for me and my wife to get to know people because, we can't compete with people that have known somebody since they were in elementary school. So we're kind of the outsiders trying to make ourselves fit in. But overall, I am impressed with Wilson where we are. I think relationally as a whole. So.
I'd like to add my little 2 cents in, Corey. I'm not going to give my age like Pastor Chris first and foremost, but from a personal perspective, though I was reared in D.C., Washington D.C., my roots were here or are here in Wilson. My mother, who is still alive, is a graduate of Darden High School, and I'm not going to give the year because she's going to get me. But the fond memories that I have in terms of the coming to Wilson and staying with my grandmother and my mother and 1300 block of Nash Street in the 60s. I do still remember a divide in terms of how Wilson was then versus now. And just small things such as I remember playing in the streets, and the streets were not paved back then on the east side of town, 1300 block of Nash and some of the surrounding streets. And I can remember such things such as that. And then from the older generation, I oftentimes heard the story of the terms of opportunities not being here in Wilson for African Americans, and how typically many of them, as soon as they graduated, they went to larger cities for a greater opportunity. And even today in 2020, I still wonder, are opportunities available in terms of for minorities and African Americans? And I just use, and I see Professor Jones as an example. He teaches at 2 universities, American University and George Washington, am I correct?
Georgetown,
American University and Georgetown. Let me get it straight. The Georgetown. And I wonder, and I don't know his age, but would that opportunity be available for him to teach at our local university here? And so the pride that I oftentimes hear from the younger generation is that the opportunities are not here for them professionally. And though Wilson is a wonderful place, and the thing that I do love about Wilson, that I see a uniqueness concerning Wilson, it has a strong sense of community. That whether you are black, white, whatever your culture, your nationality, that on the most part, as Mayor Stevens says, 99 or 90% of the time, it's about family and community. And it's a wonderful place to raise your children, and it's a wonderful place but in terms of the opportunities for advancement for our young people, I wonder, have we not just arrived, but I wondered, have we had serious, frank conversations concerning advancement, opportunities, and equality? And that's just a question that I have.
It's a good question.
That's an excellent question to ask.
Yeah.
So we have a couple reader questions from some of our readers watching the live stream on wilsontimes.com. Like to get us started with this question from Eric Jenkins. Have any of the panelists experienced racism before? If so, how did you react? And if not, how do you as an influencer and gatekeeper help prevent another generation from facing issues such as institutional racism?
I'll start that question. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Very good.
Yes.
I will say that personally, I've been a victim of racism, or I'm not even going to say racism, because sometimes I use the word racism when we may need to use the word prejudice. But I've experienced it, and it was with a law enforcement officer. Now, it wasn't in Wilson, and I need to say that it was not in Wilson. It was in a neighboring city that I was living in, and I was simply stopped because there was a robbery earlier, and the car that was being driven evidently matched the same description of the car. And, the guy came up to the car, told me to get out the car, wouldn't give me a reason why he was asking me to get out the car. And he flat out said that a black man just robbed the store. Okay, so why are you stopping me? I'm a whole school teacher at the time, and I'm just leaving the gym, and I have on gym clothes. That's because I just left the gym, and he and I got into a pretty heated debate, and then another one of his little partners came over, and the next thing I know, I was laying on top of the hood of my car. But the problem is, I was stopped and done that way simply because I was an African American, and an African American robbed a store. And it was the same model car, but it wasn't the same color car. So I don't know if they felt like I may have painted the car. I don't know what they thought I did in between that time. But, that bothered me. And I'm not going to say that was the first instance of racism or prejudice that I witnessed or I dealt with, but it was the most prevalent because it became so physical. All the way to the point when I got to the magistrate office, I ended up leaving without any charges being pressed whatsoever. So I don't know if that was their way of covering up or saying, go ahead on, go home, or, we just want to leave this alone. But it bothered me. And, the old saying, driving while black, that's a real issue. That is a real issue. And unless you have experienced it, or unless you live the life that I live in the color of skin that I live in, you wouldn't really understand. Some people say, well, you get a lot of reasons behind it, but the fact of the matter is the hue of my skin causes for a lot of questions at times. So I will say, yeah, I've dealt with it. Again, not here in Wilson, but it's still out there and it's still prevalent. But again, I do believe that we are getting better as a society. I'll end up with that.
I can echo what Emil Stevens has stated. The question was, have I ever experienced racism? Is that the question, Corey?
Yes.
More times than I can recall, more times than I care to remember, or more times than I care to count, shall I say. As a former law enforcement officer, I have been profiled on many occasions by police, not just in Wilson, but throughout the United States. And it is systemic racism that the cry is being a demand to deal with that. I've often told the church that I pastor this story, that I pulled on me by the police than I've ever had pulled on me from anyone in the streets. And it's just, I don't want to say it's a fact of life, but that's why the debate and the conversation, again, is at the forefront in terms of African-American men, and particularly, again, for young African-American men, how we are or treated, and I'm going to put we in there because I'm going to still claim to be young, how we're treated by law enforcement. And I think, again, that is something else that needs to be a real discussion. And again, it has happened everywhere. I have been, and I'll give you one example that here in Wilson, again, the city that we all love, there was one occasion several years ago that I bought a new truck, and I was in the car wash just washing my truck, and I looked up and I just noticed a gentleman who I later found out was the police just circling me and just going around watching and just looking at me, because I guess he didn't think that a young black man should be having a new truck. And that was profiling at his essence. So racism is alive and well, but it's just not in Wilson, it's everywhere. Again, all through the United States, places I've been have been profiled. And again, and that's even while serving as a law enforcement officer. So it happens, yes.
And if I could just piggyback off of what the gentleman just said, I think one thing to keep in mind is that racism now comes in different forms and fashions. It no longer presents itself with sheets, with holes in front of the sheets. And from my experiences, I can list a few, from college to hanging out at Duke, and coming back from Duke after practicing with their football players, coming back to NCCU and getting stopped because it's just a bunch of black guys in a car with some tinted windows, to even jobs, even interviewing at particular institutions, which I won't name, some here in North Carolina, white institutions, where the rhetoric in the interview would seem to go well, but when I asked for a follow-up in the interview why I probably didn't get that appointment, it absolutely had nothing to do with the job description. So, and I probably need to say this aspect too, but another thing I think we need to keep in the forefront of our thoughts is being marginalized and experiencing racism has all types of negative effects. And we never really have a tendency to talk about the psychological effects that comes along with being marginalized all your life, or being told that you're less than, maybe not verbally, right? But maybe just through no's and doors being slammed and job opportunities relinquishing themselves because of the color of your skin. So it's definitely vibrant, and I actually see bits and pieces of it now. It's not maybe not as vibrant as when some of my panelists came through, or things of that nature. But I know it's vibrant, and it's definitely in different forms and fashions in regard to what I'm seeing today.
Let me just comment that looking back at my history, I never really thought I was discriminated against or experienced racism to the extent that some people had. But I remember the water fountain issue, not being able to use the same water fountain as others because of race, not being able to use the bathroom in certain places because of race. Downtown Wilson, belt tollers caught me and my siblings going into the white bathroom because blacks were not allowed. And the manager who knew my parents told on us because we were creating people being uncomfortable, and people were talking negative because the farmer girls were using the bathroom in Wilson downtown in belts. And you didn't do that during those days. But that was the way it was. Not being able to go to the theater. When you did go, you had to sit in the top balcony and not downstairs. And parents allowing me, after many years of not allowing me to go to the theater, because there was a young black girl that had gone down to the theater, and she had a confrontation with the lady at the booth in the theater, and she ended up going to jail and staying for like 6 weeks or more and missing out on her education because of the altercation between her verbally and the white young lady that was working at the theater. But finally, my parents allowed me to go down and take other children from Wilson County with me in the school system where I was attending to join Toby Fitch and G.K. Butterfield in trying to integrate Colony Theater. So those are the things I do remember young. Going to separate schools, and my parents being threatened with a noose in their yard, as I said earlier, because they were considering allowing their children who were encouraged to attend the white schools with white children, and some people in the neighborhood didn't like it. Going to a separate hospital called Mercy Hospital in Wilson as a young girl, because this is where African Americans were to go to receive medical treatment. Not being able to go to restaurants because of my color, and just a host of things like that. But not being able to even get a library card in college without my dad getting Mayor Red Benton during that time to actually send a letter of reference for me and my sister who were in college in Durham at North Carolina Central University. And we went in to get library cards, and we were told we could not get them. And my dad had to actually get a letter from the Mayor Wilson at that time to get us a library card. So I learned early on that you take a negative and turn it into a positive. And all of those negative experiences that I had spurred me on to do the things that I wanted to do, and to not let them deter me from being successful at the things that I wanted to enjoy in life. And I've been discriminated against in terms of my salary. Without a doubt, I know that with my education background and experience, there were white men making more money than I made, and I found that out by sheer accident. And it shouldn't have been, but it did happen. So that spurred me on to do other things and to make even more money for me and my situation and my family. So not being able to shop in certain stores without people saying, oh, you don't want to buy that. That's not on sale, ma'am. You might want to look at these things over here. Those are the kind of little things that I experienced. There were major things and small things, but they all together motivated, inspired, and boosted me to go on and do better and do greater things, and to not let that deter me, because I didn't let it become my problem. I let it remain the problem of those who had a problem with me succeeding. And that's, to me, the best of all worlds. To use it as a motivator and an inspirer to do what you want to do in life and to be successful and indeed help others along the way. I've seen people in Wilson actually going into the stores and buying paper towels and toilet tissue to give to senior citizens who could not get out because of the COVID virus,
Yes.
so that they can help others. And these are Black and white people doing that in this community. I've seen people on the front line who work in hospital situations, healthcare facilities, the restaurants, the fire station, the police station, putting themselves on the line for us. And we're all in this together. And to me, if we're not going to come together around something like the pandemic, then we will never come together.
That's right.
Because the pandemic does not know a particular address. It doesn't go and say, hey, she lives over in this neighborhood, therefore I'm going knocking on her door and I'm going to give her the virus because she doesn't live in Bel Air, if you will. So I think what we're experiencing here is that it's important that we all work together as a team. We're in it together. And in order for one person to live or not be sick, we can all make a difference by doing our part, wearing the mask, washing our hands, just following those instructions from the health and science professionals, so that we can all be one and help each other to live and enjoy life and succeed. So now's the time for us to unite and not worry about insignificant, petty things that really don't matter in life when you look at people's health being in jeopardy and their lives being in jeopardy. So it's time to move forward, in my opinion. And that's where we need to be. And that's where I'm going to continue to be. And I'm happy doing that. That makes me feel good. I love loving everybody, whether they love me or not. And I'm going to continue to love people, whether they love me or not. And I don't allow myself to get involved in hate. It's draining. It takes too much energy, too much time. I don't have time to do that. I'm about helping people and being positive. If I can help anybody, I will. And if I can't, I tell you, but I will try to find somebody else that can. Yeah. And that's what it's all about for me. And that makes me happy.
Well, that is just a wonderful perspective, very positive, and we appreciate that. So I've got one more question from one of our Facebook or WilsonTimes.com rather live stream viewers from Jocelyn Jawhorn. She asked, what do you think needs to be done or can be done for that matter to prevent the 1/10 of the people Mayor Stevens mentioned from drowning out the 9/10 of us who really want to thrive in one Wilson? So what can we do to prevent the small group of people, the 1/10, from preventing the 9/10 of us who want to get along and live together in one Wilson, be united as a community? How can we prevent the 1/10 from disrupting the 9/10?
If I may, I think a good start is that we have to listen to each other. So this Farmer Butterfield gentleman, your perspectives are, thank you. Thank you for sharing those. Because I think it's important that we listen and we start to understand. Yes. And we communicate. And it's okay to communicate with each other and have different perspectives and learn from each other. I just have to tell you guys that the part that changed my life was working at Darden, coming to Darden Middle School, and just being open to new perspectives and learning from my students who are predominantly Black. And I grew up in, like I said, Washington, North Carolina, and we have similar demographics, and we were all friends, kind of like Pastor said, we're all friends. But coming to Darden helped me understand perspectives that I don't think, not that I had chosen not to understand, but that I hadn't been exposed to very much. And so listening to my kids' stories, trying to understand the backgrounds and the places that they come from and where their parents come from and the stories and experiences they have has made me grow not only as a teacher and an educator, but as a person, because I now know how to listen and appreciate and respect and understand that people come from all walks of life. And if we'll just listen to each other and appreciate for just a moment and kind of soak it all in and consider where someone else comes from, I think that's how the 9/10 of us can come together. We listen to each other, we talk to each other, and we fight for each other.
That's excellent.
I think also to add what Jennifer said, to not just listen, but to also get to learn and get a chance to know each other. And then once there is that negativity, as Representative Farmer Butterfield said, to be louder than that voice. Because if we were to just be silent and be, as has been said, silence is complicit. To once we find that someone is trying to be negative, or someone is not doing something that is positive for our community, to make a stand and to speak up against it. So I think those things would silence out that small minority that's still, because you're always going to have negativity, but it's going to silence them to the point where you can at least hopefully shame them into their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
If I could just add something on the back of that. Yeah, I mean, I agree with MK completely that the relational component is very important. You know, and I challenge my congregation with that. Get to know somebody that doesn't look like you, dress like you, act like you, live like you. You know, get out there and be in relationship with people so that you see people. And so that's part of it. The other part, which I really, really appreciated tonight, Ms. Butterfield, is you in particular, I appreciate that that you express so well that yes, we still have problems, but we have also come a long way. And see, that's what I miss, that in the national discourse. I don't hear anybody talking about that. And I think we've talked ourselves into believing that if we acknowledge we've come a long way, then we're minimizing where we now are. And I think that's a false narrative. I think it's you know, we can celebrate where we've come from and the improvements that we've made, and still acknowledge we have a ways to go. We can do both of those things at the same time. But I don't think that our politicians think we can do that. Present company excluded. But I just feel like when I listen to the national discussion on both sides of the aisle, it's, you know, there's no problem at all, or everything is just as bad as it was 60 years ago. And so we're raising a generation of people who don't know the history from where we've come. So they feel like this is like the darkest day in America's history, and it's just not. Yeah. And it doesn't mean we don't have room to go. We do have room to go. We have things we need to deal with and address. But I think we need to celebrate the people who've walked us this far. And that's okay in the national conversation. And I wish we had more of that from all levels above us. I just think it's valuable. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there.
Excellent point. Thank you so much for reiterating that for us.
To make sure that wasn't me. I heard somebody stuttering in there.
Corey, I'll offer an example.
Yes, sir.
A few months ago, me and Pastor Chris had not even met each other. We didn't know each other. And we had a chance to meet. Chris, it's probably, 2 or 3 months ago? 2 months ago?
Yeah, about 2 months ago.
About 2 months ago. So we had an opportunity to meet, and not just meet, but we developed a relationship. And as a result of that, even though we have different backgrounds, different experiences, but we developed a relationship. And as a result of that, as young people say, that's my guy now. You know, but if we had never met, or we had never took the time to develop a relationship, we wouldn't have known each other as husbands, as fathers, as we knew each other probably just as pastors or seeing a name on a church billboard. Mm-hmm. But when we actually took the opportunity and worked towards communicating and meeting and developing a relationship, again, that's my brother. So I think it takes all of us to, as I think Pastor Chris said, to get out of our box, get out of our comfort zone, and to not just meet someone, but develop relationship with them. And I think that is something that is going to be for the good of our entire community.
I would like to add something in there if you don't mind. First of all, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Good. I will say the way that we silence the 1/10 is exactly what everyone else is saying, is communication and talking and understanding that we are going to have our differences, but just because we have differences does not mean that we don't have the same end goal in mind. Now, there's a member of staff that we have become close as more so on a friendship basis, and that's because this person and I, we're from two totally different worlds, but we're able to talk to each other, and we have the understanding that I may not know, so I may be quote unquote ignorant to some things. He or she may be ignorant to some things, but you can ask anything, and you can ask in a safe way. You can ask in a safe environment, and I'm not going to judge. They're not going to judge, and that helps a lot. That helps a lot. And then I'll go even deeper. We had one of our council members who flat out took the time to meet with each individual council member and myself as well, because he wanted to understand where everybody was mentally, especially, during the passing of Mr. Floyd, because there was a lot of tension going on. And sometimes I think we base race and ideologies off of your political party more so than off of the person, because, I met some guys that were African American and they were Republicans, and the first thing I thought was they're just totally wrong. They're just looking at life totally wrong, until I started talking to them and listening to them, and the same goes with other people. Until we listen and understand where a person's coming from and understand what a person does not understand. Just because you're 40, 50, 60 years old does not mean you understand everything. There's some things that you just won't know until you ask. And some people are scared to ask. There are things that I may be a little apprehensive to ask certain people, but until we get to the point where we're able to ask, and I respect your question and you respect my answer, then that 1/10 is going to continue to be loud. But once we are able to communicate in a safe space, and I stress the word safe space, until we're able to do that, I think that those little people, the 1/10 people, they may be pretty loud, but we're getting there. And I keep saying it, we're getting there. And I hope everybody agrees with me on that.
That is a perfect segue into just one final question I'll ask you to close us out tonight. We are a couple minutes away from 8 o'clock. We may go just a moment or two over, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, and thank you all for joining us. But last question I want to ask to kind of relate it back to some of the points you were making, Mayor Stevens, about politics versus the personal relationship and interaction between people, is the question about Black Lives Matter. Now, that should not be a controversial statement. I have no problem saying Black Lives Matter. Of course they do. That is seen as a counterpoint to All Lives Matter, which has taken on a political significance. And so I think there's the Black Lives Matter movement, which is basically a statement on universal human worth. And then there's Black Lives Matter as a political objective and organization. There is a foundation called Black Lives Matter, who one of the co-founders said, we're trained Marxists. So, I mean, they're aligned with a left-wing political ideology. And I mean, that's okay. But I guess the question is there room in Black Lives Matter movement for moderates, for conservatives, for people who might not share the politics of the organizers and the founders, but are still people of goodwill and good faith and think that we need to move past the racial issues we've experienced and treat all people equally?
I want to comment on that. It shouldn't matter what party you belong to. It shouldn't matter whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent. It's about putting people first and the issues and rallying around commonalities and accomplishing common goals in life. There are some goals that we all need to be concerned about. Good education for all children. A right to a good home environment, safe home environment. Those things that we all have in common, we should rally around those commonalities and make them happen regardless of parties. It bothers me when politics get in the way of what's in the best interest of the community and lives of people. And usually, if you think about it, we usually agree on more things than we don't agree on. We have more similarities than differences. And if people look at that and stay focused on that and stay focused on the big picture and the mission, we will be successful in bridging the gaps in terms of races. I might not live to see it, but it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when, not if it's going to happen. And that's my true belief. And I guess I'm an optimist and will be till the day I die. But I just think that there are so many ways that people get divided. And if you notice, the negative things are focused on because, it's media driven. Let's face it. Those negative stories, which are minority rather than a majority of things that happen, those things get big publicity and good coverage. The positive things don't. When I was in the legislature, I found that we voted more on the same bills in the same way, regardless of party, than we didn't. But the ones that got all the attention and the press and stood out to the everyday citizens through the media were those one or two controversial things that we disagreed on. So I think we really have more in common than we realize. And a lot of times we don't all focus in on it because the ones that are so negative, like the George Floyd situation, get to be the media-driven situations, and people kind of hone in on it. And I think we need to step back sometimes and just think about, hey, this is an exception rather than the rule.
I just want to piggyback off really quickly off Representative Butterfield. She made an excellent point in regard to media and media bias, but I want to preface that segment with this. Let me just go back and address the Black Lives Matter movement. Two different groups. The names are quasi similar. Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. Me personally, I'm a fan of the term Black Lives Matter, and let me explain what I mean. I think at the end of the day, when you've been suppressed and oppressed and marginalized for so long, and you just want someone to hear what you have to say, and you're hurting, not only financially, emotionally, psychologically,